What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the ZeroHedge podcast, episode number 4. Today, I'm joined by Seamus Bruner from the Government Accountability Institute, also the author of Oligarchs. And I'm excited to have you on because, you know, a lot of us have been wondering just how organic some of these protests are and what kind of money is pushing them. And I saw you had an article that popped up on ZeroHedge saying that the latest protest that we just saw over this past weekend of the No Kings movement was backed by, I think, of $110 million from money from Soros and other individuals. So I'd love to delve into this topic of the organic nature of protest and specifically what we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, Robbie, it's good to be with you. This No Kings protest, it was supposed to be huge. It certainly was everywhere. All across the country, all across the world. There were thousands at many of the rallies. But it wasn't that fiery. It was actually indeed mostly peaceful, mostly boring, large boomer demographic, not a whole lot of enthusiasm. Of course, the West Coast popped off, LA, Seattle, Portland. They had some violence there. But all of the groups behind this protest, even in the ones on the West Coast, the money comes from an organization called it's a network, really. I mean, there's 7 funds in the Arabella Dark Money network. Arabella Advisors actually doesn't fund any of these things, but any of the protest groups. The network is funded by people like George Soros, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and the organizations behind the protest got $114.8 million in the last 4 years of recent financial disclosures. That's a lot of dough. It can fund a lot of protests. But at the end of the day, the enthusiasm wasn't there. So we kind of have determined that you can fund the organization of protest, but you can't fund an uprising.
All right. So, you know, I'm curious because I feel like if a billionaire wanted to give me $114 million to enact an agenda, I could create a lot of digital content, and I feel like I could really share a narrative. In fact, I could start an entire news organization. I'm currently sitting in a room that I've outfitted myself into being a studio, and you know, I reach a decent-sized audience for just one guy who reads some stuff and then talks on the internet. What is the agenda of these elites when they're funding these protests, and why do they even think that that's cash efficient? That just seems like such a large amount of money for what you're saying this past weekend was essentially a flop.
Yeah, the weekend was a flop, but that money goes to all kinds of things. So it's not just the protests. These groups do other things like getting out the vote. These are ballot harvesting type organizations. The ACLU is one of the major protest organizers. They had the people in the vests on the ground doing peacekeeping and medic and legal representation type work. The ACLU is one of the major organizations suing the Trump administration, getting his agenda stopped at every turn. They're big immigration advocates or illegal immigration advocates. They will try to sue for every deportation type deal. So they can grind progress to a halt. And also, you know, as we saw in 2020, it takes an enormous network of organizations to get out the vote, to drag Joe Biden and the ballots for him over the finish line. And so while this protest may not have been a flop, not a huge success, a lot of the work that these organizations do, this is kind of just like a practice run. They've got to keep the organizers well-funded, keep them from going and finding jobs in the private sector, and just keep them motivated and activated, and just keep banging the drum of progressivism.
Now, I see this as being just part of the playbook of the elites. I remember, personally, I didn't get vaccinated. I did quite a bit of content speaking out against basically the whole COVID madness that we all lived through. And one of the ways that they tried selling everybody on the vaccine was by telling you, you're crazy if you're not getting this. Everybody's getting this. And then when we saw the compliance numbers before mandates, it wasn't all that high. And then especially once you got to the boosters, really nobody was interested. But they love trying to basically make it seem like you're crazy if you have any thoughts that are questioning what you're hearing from the official apparatus. And that's part of the playbook. I think that's why, traditional media is still well-funded by vaccine companies and also by Boeing and others. And that's why there's so much money that flew basically from Fauci into all of the college and universities so that everyone would endorse his agenda. So I'm curious here because this kind of just plays into the playbook of throwing a lot of money to try and demonstrate that there's massive public interest. We saw that especially with Kamala Harris and the big rallies that were being attended, which was basically because she spent hundreds of millions of dollars to have celebrities show up and then not even sing songs and piss off the whole audience who thought they were getting a free performance. But I'm curious to hear just a little bit more about this general playbook of throwing all of this money to try and pretend like there's organic support for things that just don't exist.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the big picture. So since 2016, when Trump was elected the first time, the Democrats have been in disarray. They were stunned, and they thought they were more popular than they were. They're coming off of, Obama, who was basically the second coming to the political left. And so in 2016, it really became apparent that they've lost control of the narrative, and Donald Trump blew up traditional media. He took his message via social media, via other online platforms directly to the people. And so corporate media has been imploding since then. The monopoly that they've had on public opinion, the corporate press, has been shattered, and the Democratic Party has been just struggling to gain traction. I mean, they are on the wrong side of almost every issue, and they're doubling down, which is bewildering. But so when that happens, they get Joe Biden into office in 2020. They make it through the Trump administration first term. They have all these, it was one big uprising from day one, with the Women's March and then moving forward through BLM and all the rest of it. What does Joe Biden do when they drag him across the finish line and get him into office? The very first thing that he does is he cancels every single immigration policy that Trump had put in place. Trump had basically brought immigration down to record lows. Joe Biden flings open the border. He rescinds all the executive orders and brings in, over his term, 10 million or more people to the United States. That's part one of the playbook, is just importing new bodies. One, they know that these immigrants will eventually become voters, whether it's they've been legalized or they are able to obtain ballots in other ways. The other reason is apportionment. So states like California have, upwards of possibly 9 representatives. We don't really know how many illegal aliens there are in California, but those lead to more representatives in Congress. So that's the first thing Joe Biden does to prop up his party. The second thing he does is he passes a series of, he called it his Build Back Better plan, a series of laws, gigantic slush fund bills, appropriations bills. The first was the American Rescue Plan. That was roughly $2 trillion. Then he passes the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and that was $1.2 to $1.5 trillion. And then he passes the most ridiculous one of all, the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's upwards of another $1 trillion. You can't really fathom how much money that is, but I have been following it now for years, and what happens is that money trickles down. That is being used as a force multiplier for all of these left-wing schemes. So when you say it doesn't seem like a very good use of money to put into these protests, consider that a lot of these groups get government funding, your money. They're using your money for their political agenda. One example of this group out in LA, we found over $50 million to Chirla, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights Los Angeles. This has been accused by Senator Josh Hawley of fomenting and aiding and abetting illegal activity in the LA riots. That's an allegation, but you see them right at the front lines there with their Chirla banners, $50 million in taxpayer funding to just one of these groups. So while they're getting a lot of funding from the political left, billionaires, George Soros, Bill Gates, et cetera, the Arabella network, they're also using taxpayer money. And so it's not really a surprise that they're not particularly efficient at it.
So let's delve into that for a second, because, there was a lot of excitement when Elon Musk was first doing the Doge efforts. And I think one of the biggest or most scandalous storylines was kind of USAID and how much money was going to NGOs that was essentially, in my opinion, working against the American interest. So I know that there was a lot of money funded to NGOs to essentially illegally get as many people as they could across the border. I know on the way out, Joe Biden got $20 billion into a single bank account that was supposed to then go to green energy, which I see all of that as being scams. I've reduced it to just a simple phrase of the elites don't like to compete. And so they're basically trying to acquire as much resources as they can into technology that doesn't actually work in the marketplace, and then potentially, and I think you would lean towards this as well, try and work towards actually just charging us for carbon credits while, they create technologies that supposedly reduce carbon, but then if you look at what went into creating those technologies, they're not actually carbon reducing. I'm curious to hear a little bit more of the picture, because I'm sure it extends beyond USAID, but how much government money is essentially just funded to NGOs that then goes to agendas that I would say do not work in my interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've basically boiled it down, these $1 trillion spending, $6 trillion in 4 years. You cannot fathom how much money that is. But it's that's why inflation was so bad and still remains pretty bad, is because they dumped $6 trillion over 4 years. It'll reach that. It's kind of hard to calculate exactly how much, but it's a ton of money. Three motives, I would say, why they pass these things. Number one is welfare to oligarchs. I mean, George Soros, Bill Gates, they all have private investments. That's how they became billionaires. Bill Gates has Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Mark Zuckerberg is a major investor, and several other of the left-wing tech elites are investors in this Breakthrough Energy Ventures. There's a bunch of others. Bill Gates has Cascade Investments, et cetera. Those things all have, green technology companies. Bill Gates has his Terra Power. That's a small modular nuclear reactor. That's gotten over $100 million in taxpayer funding. So a lot of these green energy, so-called green energy technologies that these guys have major shares in, Rivian, for example, the truck company, Bezos, Soros, both major investors. They lost their shirts when Rivian went down. And so what does Joe Biden do? Gives Rivian a $6.6 billion loan guarantee on the way out the door in December of 2024. So that's motive number one, is just pure welfare for oligarchs, propping up their companies that couldn't make it on their own. Motive number two is kind of what I just talked about with the protests, and this is where USAID might fall in, where the NGOs are actually achieving political purposes. This is actually, in my opinion, a little more nefarious than just straight handouts to billionaires. This is where they're actually funding their political movements with your tax dollars. I mean, that would actually outrage most people, is that, when you have a riot in your city or something, your city's getting burned down by Molotov cocktails and rioters and arsons and vehicles, that a single penny would come from taxpayers should be an outrage. And it's millions and millions and billions of dollars that these left-wing groups and NGOs funded by USAID, who are doing the same thing, color revolution type stuff in other countries, by the way. That's outrageous. I would say the trickier and more complicated motive number three is they're actually waging war on you, not just through political NGOs, but by changing the entire system. They are waging war on middle America. There would be people like Bill Gates, George Soros, the political left. I wrote a book called The Controligarchs, the word control and oligarchs. They are waging war right now, obviously, on the fossil fuel industry. Historically, people in the fossil fuel carbon energy industry, carbon-based energy companies, historically, those are right-wing donors. They lean right-wing. Wildcatters in Texas, coal miners in West Virginia. They are trying to and successfully bankrupting that very critical industry in America by raising all kinds of emissions, all kinds of regulations. We could spend a whole episode talking about the war on oil and gas, but just boil it down to Joe Biden's statement before he got elected, which was, I promise you, he says to some woman at a campaign rally, I promise you, we are going to put the fossil fuel industry out of business. So they are waging war on carbon. They're also waging war on farmers. They are waging war in all kinds of different ways on our farmers, which is all of middle America. Those are the flyover states, the ones they don't care about very much. And so they are taking off the chessboard, trying to anyway, the people who make this country work. And meanwhile, Bill Gates, Bezos, Zuckerberg, they're all invested in these alternative proteins. They think that we want to eat like Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods. Consumers have rejected that. But when your steak prices keep going up at the supermarket, and now it's $30-40 for a ribeye, it's going to become a delicacy, and you might end up resorting to some of these alternative protein type foods. And so it's really a 1-2-3 punch against their political opponents, and they're using your money to do it. It's dark stuff.
So, in other words, certain characters, such as I think you mentioned Zuckerberg, we've got Bill Gates, Soros, that's kind of the trifecta of names that show up. They have really integrated themselves with the liberal politicians in this country, and so they're looking for legislation that essentially just boosts their industries, and they're working with the left to do it. That's the general picture?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more in the book. I mean, Bezos, of course, Richard Branson of Virgin Mobile, they're all the big investors into these kind of technologies and foods and, energies of the future. That's the gist of it. They want to control your life. These technologies, the final thing I'd say is it's really about the patents. They are pushing all of the open source technologies, like, carbon-based energy has been around long enough that the patents have expired, and now they're basically open source from the drilling to the exporting and the transporting and the storing and the refining, all of that stuff. That's what makes it really, really cheap. Ditto for cows. I mean, cows and real protein have been around a long time. You can't really patent a steak. Meanwhile, the protein chains and the Impossible and the Beyond Meats, they're all patented, just like the seeds, and that gives the owners. Like Bill Gates owns a lot of these companies, or a big chunk of them. It gives them 20-year monopolies, and then all they have to do is tweak the protein chain and re-up the patent. Gives them a monopoly on food. So they did it with the seeds too. Bill Gates was a huge investor in Monsanto when they, got into technology seed type thing.
Got it. And then just on this topic, and then I want to go back to the riots, rallies, and protests. How did BlackRock fit into this picture? Because everything I was reading about the ESG scores and kind of this movement towards the green energy, they seem to be a central figure. Thus far on the list of names that you've mentioned, you didn't mention them. So I'm curious if they weren't as key of a player, because I thought they were kind of leading the charge.
Oh, it's a greght question. I've got a colleague who's going to kill me for not putting them into the article. BlackRock is in everything, of course. I mean, they're so big. Of course, Larry Fink and his vision for the future is dark and filled with control schemes. I've got him in the chapter of the book on central bank digital currencies and digital ID. They're funding every sort of left-wing thing. They're one of the major financiers.
All right, so going just back to the protest for a second, as I said, it is in the playbook to try and make it seem like you're crazy, or to make so much. That's the way the entire media apparatus works, is that it just repeats so much information, and they've lost their stronghold thanks to podcasts like this that give you different information. But it used to be wherever you went, you were just getting the official narrative repeated very loudly and being told anyone who tells you otherwise is just crazy. And so, as I can understand a playbook where essentially you're trying to manufacture as if there's organic movements and protests. I think there was even a story that people were being paid to protest outside of the Diddy trial, or that they were trying to do so. So I'm kind of curious for the larger picture of how often, if we're seeing a protest movement, is that actual just people who are paid to show up? I think I heard there was another ZeroHedge article that the CCP was involved with the ICE protest that happened. I'm really pulling out of my memory here, but I seem to remember some storylines about Russia being involved in BLM, which would kind of make sense just to undermine the fabric of our country and try and make that movement look bigger than it actually was. But I'm curious, how big is the picture of, if I'm watching a protest, of how many people might be showing up that's getting paid, or if it's mostly just in the organizers and the organizational apparatus?
I would be completely making these figures up, but I'd say never less than 10% of the people there getting paid. There's a bunch of organizations. So I went to our local No Kings protest, and I live in a small town. It was a pretty well attended. I mean, I'd say a couple of thousand people. Usually it's maybe 1,000. But a huge number of those people were people who were officially working it. They had vests on, or volunteers. There's volunteers, then there's paid people too. And hard to differentiate how many of each there are, but there's people who are like officially organizing and setting things up and manning the tables. And it's obvious that they are with the official organizations like the Indivisible Project. They had all kinds of Indivisible Project gear and swag, and they were handing things out. The ACLU, I'd say there's probably 50 ACLU people there. But if you're asking about the people who look like your average Joe who showed up, it's hard to say. I'd say there's quite a bit. I mean, the people on the left, they crave meaning. They don't have a lot of things to do. A lot of these people were retired, retirees who are just kind of looking to relive the glory days maybe of the 60s. So I'd say it's more organic than what people say online. They say, oh, it's all inorganic. It, of course, depends protest to protest. This No Kings one, though, I'm specifically talking about, there was, I would say, probably 75% people were organic or more. I recognize them and they're not paid. But that's just this one. I mean, they're kind of looking for a reason to be upset, and No Kings gave it to them. All kinds of other examples. Like when you're looking at images that are on the news, this I would say this was kind of the point of the No Kings protests this past weekend, was that they captured the mainstream media, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, they want to manufacture this illusion of dissent, that everybody is so mad at Donald Trump and he doesn't have the mandate anymore. Nothing could be further from the truth. All of the polling is against these protests. So you'll find these people, these left-wingers, protesting against banning men from competing in women's sports. 80% of America, of all backgrounds, support banning men from women's sports. Ditto for deportations. I mean, it's an 80-20 issue. America supports deportations. Now, maybe they change their mind when they see kids in cages, but that's kind of what this is all about. It's this manufacturing a consensus by the political left that everybody disagrees with the ICE raids. I don't think very few people disagree with getting pedophiles, murderers, rapists out of the country, and that's pretty much who Trump is focused on thus far. I mean, a lot of people in the Trump base are disappointed that he hasn't deported more people. He's really been just focusing on the violent criminals. And so for them to all be protesting and trying to bust open the doors on ICE, what CNN does and the rest of them do is they capture the biggest crowd they can possibly find, and then they plaster it on their network saying America is against Trump. And it's pretty effective, actually, that way, at least for people who watch those networks, which is a shrinking number.
All right. So shifting gears here for a second, we have talked a little bit about, I think you had thrown out the numbers of trillions of dollars that got funneled to NGOs under the Biden administration. I didn't really see the dots directly connected, but I think certainly the Biden administration did everything they could to bring as many people over the border as they could. And then there were also reports of NGOs working in South America, giving out pamphlets or otherwise to seemingly help people make it to this country. Then there was the storyline, like I said, Elon Musk comes in and he goes, hey, this USAID thing is funding NGOs. But there wasn't really, or at least I didn't see it, there weren't really great reporting on, hey, X amount of money went to X company, and this is what they were doing that really undermines the, like I said, my personal interests in this country, which is just living as a free American. So, for example, if money went into an organization that was looking to censor the internet under the claims of fairness on the internet or whatever fancy title they gave it, I would say, hey, that's not in my interest. Are there any top examples that you can name of, hey, this NGO got funded and here's the terrible thing that they were doing?
Yeah, I mean, the Red Cross is a huge it's a huge organization involved in the transporting and facilitation of the invasion at the southern border. I don't have this specific dollar amount, but they absolutely get government funding. Same thing for HIAS, HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. They get government money. And they have been at the forefront of bringing people up through the Darien Gap, giving them cell phones, giving them maps, directing them, showing them. And then once they arrive in the country, resettling them. And then as far as the government money, it's a huge amount of money that the federal government, here's how it kind of works, is they give it to the states. So New York City alone got $1 billion from the federal government to resettle migrants, and that pays for the hotel. They were staying, I believe, at the Roosevelt Hotel and a number of other hotels in New York. And so it kind of funnels down from the federal government, mostly to the states. But, the NGOs also get big checks from the feds. They get them from the states. CHRLA does that. The Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, LA, gets both federal and state taxpayer funding. $50 million is what we calculated for Churla, and they're involved in resettling migrants. And then they also are involved in getting out the vote. So it's like the Churla helped set up ballot boxes, which is, it's not a crime to do that, but it's just like it's a little close for comfort to have, facilitate the resettlement of non-citizens into the U.S. as well as work on getting out the vote. That's just not a good look, I guess. But there's a lot more I'll send you. We've got a couple great reports on the organizations profiting and getting government money from, for the resettlement of migrants into the U.S.
Excellent. All right, so I want to hit you with a couple other recent storylines, and hopefully I don't get you into any trouble here. Last 10 days I was on the road. I do stand-up comedy, and I was traveling quite a bit, so I didn't get to delve into what happened with the Minnesota assassin to the extent that I usually will, research these topics. I did see that you had delved in a little bit, and so perhaps you could tell us firstly what even the incident was and what the shady storyline is there that you were starting to investigate.
Yeah, it's a totally bizarre story. I don't, it's always, I don't want to speculate about anything, but I can just say it's really weird that the guy, he's a Tim Walz appointee, a number of years back to one of the state boards. And we know from Tim Walz that he's a pretty political guy. This would be Kamala's vice presidential running mate. This guy, Vance Bolter, he's a ghost of some, it's just weird. He's got 4 different NGOs. They're spread across Africa, the Middle East. And, you can't find any financials. I mean, it's our mission at the Government Accountability Institute is to follow the money. I'm able to find the corporate records for, like, one of them is You Gave Them Something to Eat Incorporated. You look it up, you can find the corporate docs. It doesn't look like it has any money. Maybe he's just a nobody. He could be, just somebody who lost it and decided to go on a shooting spree. But it just looks weird. And also the thing I find really bizarre about it is that both sides, like the left and the right in America, are accusing each other of this being one of theirs. So you had Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat, saying that this is a MAGA assassin. You heard Tim Walz himself, the governor of Minnesota, try to say that this was a partisan political assassination, meaning that this guy was a Republican ostensibly who went and killed a Democrat. And backing up a little bit. So the day before the No Kings protests on Saturday, a state representative, Melissa Hortman, and her husband were shot in their home. Before that, another state representative, Hoffman, was shot. They were shot, but they survived. Hortman and her husband died tragically, and both ostensibly, allegedly, at the hands of this guy, Vance Bolter. Well, in his car, he had a stack of No Kings flyers for the protest the next day. And so this image goes out, the Minnesota Police Department, they put it out, that he's a No Kings assassin. Well, naturally, people on the right start saying, oh, he's a Democrat, he's a lefty, he's got No Kings flyers in his car. But then you have Tim Walz say, and then you had this guy's roommate, the alleged shooter's roommate, come out and say, oh, no, he's totally a Donald Trump supporter, he's MAGA all the way. And so you have the left start saying that this guy's, a right-wing shooter. He shot a Democrat after all. And so I don't really know what to make of it. I don't really want to speculate. I do find it really bizarre. I find he was in this getup, like wearing like a latex skin-tight mask that makes him look very, very creepy. The police encountered him before he actually went and shot them and noted that he looked suspicious in the police report, but didn't stop. I think they even said they knocked on his window in his vehicle, but then they just drove on. And hours later, or moments later, he shot the state representative. So I don't know what side he's on. I know he's connected to a bunch of NGOs. He looks, he glows in my opinion, but that's the most I could say about that.
And what was the storyline with the cell phone tracking data? Because I had seen similar reports when it came to the first Donald Trump assassin. That story was just odd because how was it possible that this kid managed to get on top of the roof and that nobody spotted him, no one took him out sooner? And then there were reports making their way around on Twitter, which, it's hard to differentiate truth from absolute just bonkers fantasy, but there were reports going around of essentially he had visited a building in DC a number of times. Then it was odd that he had no presence on social media. Then you had the next assassin who seemed to have a weird tie-in with Ukraine, that somehow an American citizen is trying to recruit people and is spending time over the Ukraine. That seemed fishy. So I was curious if you could give us a few more details on, the Minnesota shooter and what was kind of seems screwy about some of his cell phone location data.
Yeah, the first thing to note about geofencing and kind of pinging, someone's device is that there can be false positives, or you can not be certain that it is the person you're looking at's device. I mean, you can get a reasonable confidence interval, like if they're going back and forth to a place that they are, that's where they work. But the caveat would be this could be his wife, this could be his roommate, or could be someone else who frequents his farm. But that said, assuming that the device is his, it traveled to Washington, D.C., traveled to a number of cities up the East Coast, and it was overseas. It was in Africa, Middle East looking places. So, that would comport with his, NGOs that he had. He had this thing, the Minnesota Africans United. That was one of the groups that Bolter, the shooter in Minneapolis, is affiliated with, or he was the principal of. That's one. So he had an Africa, Minnesota group. And then he also had a couple of Red Lion or something, that was based in Africa, I think based in Congo. And he says in his bio that he travels to Africa. So, it could be his wife's device that was traveling to DC. It could be his roommate's device, unclear. But if it was his device, then that raises a lot of questions. I mean, why, you'd really want to know who he's meeting with in DC or what he's doing in DC.
And I guess also abroad for these NGOs, which there's the plausible deniability that he did at one time have a government job. So maybe this is all reasonable work. But as we said, with all this money that seems to be just pouring into NGOs, it does create a bit of a picture of, hey, we'd like some transparency, because the lack of transparency is what leads to all these questions and both possibilities or just lunatic theories on Twitter. It could be one of the other. So speaking of lunatic theories on Twitter, there's a storyline that I find fascinating that I've not been able to delve into, and I think it's pronounced Palantir. I think I have that right. And there's some contingency of people that are at least floating the theory that while we all thought Donald Trump was America first, really he was a different side of the deep state. He's teamed up with Peter Thiel, and they're pushing forward with some sort of an agenda for massive, tracking technology. And obviously, anyone who just went through COVID, we really don't like the idea of government knowing where we are at all times and doing this data surveillance, because they teased for a period of time, potentially not just having little easily fabricated COVID cards, but actually having health passports, which could mean tying you to things even like carbon consumption, meat consumption, really tracking everything that you're doing. And what can empower people like the elites of Bill Gates or otherwise to make profits while not actually doing anything that values the marketplace, but basically just stealing wealth from you and, charging you more for things that you are otherwise doing or consuming. So I understand the fears, and that also exists for digital currencies, which perhaps we could break down also. So I fully understand the fear of people not wanting government investing further and being able to track them, particularly if you saw some of the images of what was going on in China with the facial recognition technology during COVID and the check in the X system. It was absolutely frightening. So I'm curious of this storyline that's kind of making the rounds of that Donald Trump's a representative for Peter Thiel, and that government is starting to use this technology. I don't know. What side are you on this? And can you give us any details on what people are speculating?
Yeah, sure. Well, Peter Thiel, he's a brilliant man, and Palantir is a brilliant company run by Alex Karp, another brilliant guy. It's an AI company. And what it does is Palantir will go in, it's got this Foundry software, and it will turn your company, pretty much only the government can afford it, or major financial institutions, defense contractors, et cetera. And they will get to know your business line, how your organization agency runs, and then they will teach you how to and build proprietary tools, custom built AI for your business or agency. And so it was set up after 9/11. They wanted to catch terrorists, and I think
CIA funded, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, exactly. Its first client was the CIA. It was InQtel, which is the venture capital arm of the CIA. I think on a Reddit space, a Reddit AMA or something, Peter Thiel answered, people said, aren't you funded by the CIA or owned by the CIA? He says, no, the CIA, or no, aren't you a front for the CIA? And he says, no, the CIA is a front for Palantir. And so, it's a very cool company. And then with that said, the contracts it's getting, it's getting a lot of data from HHS, health data, IRS, your tax data and incomes, Treasury, et cetera. When you put all of these pieces together, you can understand why people would be leery, skeptical, or even afraid of one company having so much access to private citizen data, especially when you can put it all together. And one of the things that Palantir does is come up with threat assessments, of potential terrorists. But for people on the political right who have been labeled potential terrorists, the January 6 people, for example, locked up and thrown in jail. And, you can understand why people would not want one company to have so much control over, what and be able to label them a threat. And then, if they get labeled a threat of some kind, then all of a sudden all their tax data, health data, et cetera, is in that company's hands, and they can quickly upend your life. Imagine an audit, like an IRS audit, which people have said are terrible, terrible things to go through. Imagine that in just every facet of your life. It would be a nightmare. And so here's the problem: is like you would want something like Palantir in the hands of Trump if you're a Trump supporter. But what happens when the administration changes? These contracts are built to outlast and outlive any given administration. And so what happens when you've got all of these awesome tools and powerful AI in the hands of like Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom? I mean, they will be able to rain holy hell down on their political opponents. And, people are right to be very wary of it. It could be, a government or technology company big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you have. So, jury's out. We'll see. I mean, it may be good for now, and then it may not be so good.
Well, I guess just to delve into some of the abuses we saw from prior administrations, I was personally removed from YouTube many times for what turned out to be accurate reporting about what was going on during COVID. And there were certainly algorithms at work and, policing transcripts and seeing what kind of language was being used. I think the worst of what we saw was the possibility of health passports that existed. There also was a storyline pre-Donald Trump of a potential central bank digital currency, which means that they could turn off your income, usage of money at any time, or give you allowances for how much money could be spent on particular things, or say, hey, you're putting out misinformation that we don't like, so we're removing your funds. And good luck. I guess you're homeless, screaming in the street that the government took your money. You think people are going to listen to you or care about that? And then also, we did see, I think it was under the Obama administration, where a lot of right-wing nonprofits were being audited at a higher rate. Was that Obama or Biden? I don't remember off the top of my head. I believe it was Obama. And then last one, as you mentioned, January 6th, people can go watch it. There was an ex-FBI official on Bill Maher who basically started advocating for a domestic terrorism title after January 6th. And the problem with the domestic terrorism title is that if someone like the Democrats are in charge, you can be just a loyal Trump supporter. And what is it that gives you the title of domestic terrorist if someone who is just peacefully walked into that building because, in my opinion, I think the FBI created a racket, but I'm kind of conspiratorial. I don't want to go too crazy on the ZeroHedge channel here. But, there were peaceful people that took a free tour that day and then got in trouble. And then the Democrats tried to pitch a domestic terrorism title. So Yeah, it is very scary to think that government could be ramping up these technologies, even if you trust Donald Trump, because that could be handed to the next administration and, working against you because essentially it's just improving their skills to be able to accumulate the data and track your behavior and then basically decide who they think is an enemy of their agenda and using it against you, which we already saw. I mean, they did it during COVID. People were deplatformed. People were censored off the internet, and they would have gone harder if they could have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, that is a very easy way to look at it. Like, would you want Chris Wray or Merrick Garland or the IRS official you're talking about under Obama who was targeting conservative groups and not giving them tax exempt status, Lois Lerner, that's a flashback. Would you want them to be able to just determine what kind of a threat you are and change the algorithm? I mean, dial it up one way or another. Anthony Fauci, would you like him to be able to instantly know if you are, a anti-vaxxer and working together with Merrick Garland or, anybody else? And so it's like people don't want the government to have amazing powers like being able to put people on threat assessment lists. I mean, the people have talked for decades about being on a list. The thing about it being on a Palantir or any other AI company list is that it's actually real, and they are, they can change the criteria by which you become determined to, a threat and surveilled. And it's just, I mean, I think there's probably some privacy, major privacy concerns. Unfortunately, things like FISA and other National Security Patriot Act type stuff have done away with Fourth Amendment claims for whatever reason against bulk collection and I guess the government sharing this data. But there's all kinds of this kind of is back to the cell phone data with the potential shooters, alleged shooters. That's like public data. So piecing this all together, it's like, I don't know. We live in an odd time where there's just no such thing as privacy anymore, and I guess people just have to get used to that. But yeah, you don't want these kind of tools in the wrong people's hands because they will investigate you. The political left will go after you. They're playing a much more aggressive game than the political right is.
All right. So now, just to kind of strong arm the argument for these technologies. Now, I believe taxation is theft. I pay my taxes. I'd rather pay less taxes. I don't exactly like the idea of having better algorithms for figuring out who might be paying not enough on their taxes. But I would also understand if you're the IRS, you're shorthanded on agents. They don't seem to do, they don't seem to do a great job with the tax collection. I could see the argument being made of, hey, with these new AI tools, we could actually make sure that everyone in America is paying their fair share. It happens to be that the elites have the best usage to doing deductions or otherwise. And so we're going to be tapping into new AI technology in order to basically just make our tax code more fair and make sure that people are paying what they're supposed to be paying. And so I don't like that. I see taxation as theft. I don't want to make the government's job any easier, particularly in stealing my money. But I do understand AI is a new tool. And so to say government should not be allowed to use this new tool in order to do its job while all of us are continuing to basically embrace technology and get better at what we're doing, it's almost a tough fight. So my question for you is, or maybe you don't even know this, but what is the Trump administration claiming that it's embracing this technology for? Like, what is even their pitch for, hey, here's where we're using it and here's why we need it?
Robbie, that is a terrifying take on the IRS. No, I know you're just playing devil's advocate here. Of all the agencies that I do not think should have AI tools, it is the IRS. But no, the pitch is, yeah, exactly like you say, government efficiency. We don't want to waste money, on all this government bloated bureaucracy. So I hope that they, I hope that they start with the other agencies. But I know that it's got, Palantir got the IRS contract, so that's where they're going. I mean, there's so much money wasted by the government. We talked about it earlier with the trillions and trillions. I don't think we have a revenue problem. I think we have a spending problem. I hope they unleash it on the spending first. That's the pitch. What Donald Trump. I mean, AI is amazing. AI can do all kinds of things, and so making our government more efficient, it would be a wonderful use of AI. putting it in the enforcement agencies, that's an unfortunate, that's not where I'd like it to start. I'd like it to start, HHS is a good one. That's the one that spends the most money. So if they can root out waste, fraud, abuse, there's a ton of abuse and fraud and waste in the Medicare, Medicaid programs. You can't even talk about Social Security and all of the entitlements because people think you're trying to rob them of their checks. But there's dead people. We know this from Elon Musk. There are dead people getting checks, and maybe they're all, their kids or whoever, caretakers are still cashing those checks. And so if they can save us, of a 4 to 5 trillion annual budget, the amount of money the U.S. spends every year is, 4, maybe up to 6, depending on how these spending bills go. But $4 trillion, let's just call it 4. Of that, $2 trillion is spent by HHS. So yes, I would love AI, Palantir, whichever, to find every dollar they can save us. If they end up catching the big tax cheats, that's an added bonus. But if they start going after, mom and pops and small businesses, which is typically how the IRS goes after people. They don't go after the big guys because they know that those guys have better lawyers and better accountants than the government has. If they start going after small businesses, people already struggling, that'll be a pretty messed up use of this new technology.
Well, now to go just the absolute other way, I think from what we saw of what Doge was doing and how much Congress wanted to actually initiate and solidify those cuts and how interested Donald Trump was in keeping that party going, the idea of them taking AI technology just to figure out the fraud and the abuse in the government, I can't imagine that they're going to take this technology and go, you know what? The Pentagon has never passed an audit, so we're going to actually use AI and figure out where all the money's going. I think the likelihood of them taking this technology to actually make government more efficient and root out the fraud and abuse, which is probably the way that most of these guys are actually earning the real big bucks, is on the back end and where all the slush fund money goes to. So I think for people listening to this, if you're wondering whether or not you should oppose a government embracing this technology, it sounds to me, as an observer, I can't imagine that they're using it to cut their own power.
No, absolutely not. And here's, what I sort of noticed with the, you find a lot of people on the political right who are very upset about the waste, the fraud, the abuse, the huge national debt. They're very much in favor of AI being used to create government efficiency, and they kind of cheer for mass layoffs of federal workers. And I'm not in favor of having a big, huge workforce that doesn't do anything. But the flip side, what's going to happen when the government does get really lean and mean with AI and they lay off? It's the largest employer in the country. You're going to have, if they do go through with the mass layoffs, I haven't seen those yet, but what are conservatives, right-wing people going to say when the private sector decides that AI can make their business more efficient? You're already seeing it. Amazon, I think just today announced mass layoffs coming because they're going to be replaced by AI. And every AI expert agrees that the job losses are coming. They are going to be huge, possibly bigger than we think. Low-end estimates are, in the 30 to 40% of white-collar jobs, within 5 years or so. That's an enormous, we're talking millions, if not tens of millions of people who, if they don't learn how to adapt, and it's, you can't, some people aren't going to learn how to adapt quickly enough. There are going to be significant job losses. And when, how are conservatives going to, they're going to say, wait, so it's good enough for the government, but not for the private sector? Companies are good, they have to answer to shareholders. Shareholders are going to say, and board members are going to say, why wouldn't we adopt AI if it can save us a good chunk of money? Why wouldn't we lay off a sizable chunk of our workforce if AI can replace them? And so, mass layoffs, AI is going to become a socialism machine if we continue like this with mass layoffs, because what happens when you don't have a job? We saw it during COVID. You want a check, that the people are already demanding universal basic income checks. Sam Altman of OpenAI, ChatGPT, is funding the largest studies into universal basic income. And Senator Adam Schiff from California is already introducing legislation to do studies into universal basic income, basically welfare for all. And you can understand, people who hate welfare, if they can't get a job, they'll do anything. And so in order to get these UBI checks, I mean, Sam Altman has already said this of OpenAI, you're going to need a digital ID. So it's going to, AI is going to lead to, if they don't have digital ID sooner, you're going to need a digital ID, probably biometrically linked, and then ditto for central bank digital currencies. BlackRock, they say that central bank digital currencies are crucial, not just for getting migrants money to the, Larry Fink actually said that we really need a CBDC because it will help get the immigrants money faster, and then it will make the remittances flow out of our country faster. Staggering quote. But they're going to need a central bank digital currency linked to your digital ID to get you your UBI checks. At least that's going to be the pitch. That's how they would get it done, is people who didn't want a shot, they got a shot to keep their job. And if you are relying on a check, if they tell you it's got to be CBDC and digital ID, people are going to take that. So we're kind of hurtling full speed ahead. I understand that it's an arms race with China. We can't let China win. I'm just not sure what the finish line looks like in this AI arms race, and it seems a little dystopian.
That's such a fascinating take because typically speaking, the way I'm oriented in thinking is that automation creates wealth, and that typically speaking, there's winners and losers, but it's kind of just human evolution. And so if you look at the backlog of technological developments and people whose jobs it displays, such as, all of the innovations we've had that have made farming more efficient, I would think that, automating a lot of jobs now. So for example, maybe I could get my healthcare a lot easier. I can walk into an initial scanner that can tell me what my problem is. And perhaps there's a doctor who ends up, servicing 200 patients a day instead of a single or, 25 patients a day. I usually see innovation as a wealth creator that will then lead to, new technology and new jobs. I do, however, understand the risk that you've laid out, that that wealth creation and job displacement does create an opportunity for a universal basic income. And you are 100% right that we saw if government sends you a check directly to your door or removes your job, you're willing to basically tolerate anything that you wouldn't have originally, particularly if it means you're getting a direct check. So while I don't know that I agree completely with your picture about automation creating permanent displacements, I do understand the risk for it creating a better opportunity for universal basic income.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's set yet. Just the predictions I'm reading from all the AI experts, it's gonna. I mean, it's I guess displacement, but there's gonna be, I don't know, people in the 50, 60, 70 age range who still work, who are not going to be able to either learn to code or even adapt to. I mean, most people over age 60 that I encounter want nothing to do with AI.
I can understand that. The limited usage that I've made use of is essentially Twitter Gronk, and it's completely, I think it's pronounced Gronk. I don't know why I say Gronk. I just do. But it's, I have found that it's a pretty incredible tool that while I'm reading news stories, I'm able to fill in all the details of what nobody tells me. And then I'm able to get analytics I never went in. Like, for example, today, I was just delving in. I was trying to figure out basically how many missiles Iran has left versus how many missiles Israel has left that can take them out, and who's going to run out first. And at least that limited analysis kind of came to the conclusion Iran's running out before Israel. I don't know anyone else that's done that study. I don't know that those results were completely accurate. It was more that I was just interested in delving into it. But it is incredible to me, the world of analytics, that I'm able to kind of get my hands on, or the way I can fill in details or figure out who's lying to me in a way that I couldn't have even just off a Google search. And that's kind of just level one of AI. But then also I might fall into the case study of people who are willing to embrace the technology.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I found I use it in a lot of different applications, and it is amazing. You can upload a spreadsheet and just say something. I mean, I've got a lot of different targeted prompts, but I mean, thousands and thousands of rows of data, and just say, give me some insights. Like something that colloquial. Give me some insights, and it will just start listing some things that you would never have seen, if you had spent hours and hours and hours combing through it. And you can't rely on it. I mean, a lot of people are very quick to say AI hallucinates. It's like, yeah, well, like the number of news articles that are like completely garbage, either made up or containing wrong facts. I mean, it's not like the state of human journalism is much better. So like when you're putting data in and asking for insights, all that does is give you a clue. Then yes, you have to go and double check it and triple check it and make sure that every fact is right before you write anything. But you can process enormous amounts of information much faster. Reading. We do a lot of FOIA requesting and getting thousands and thousands of pages of FOIAs. And it's like most of the stuff that you get back in a FOIA it's useless. It's not, but you can say, dump all that stuff into an AI and say, pull out every single dollar sign. And in less than 30 seconds, a minute maybe, you've got every document, every dollar sign that appears in thousands of pages of FOIA material. So it's remarkable stuff. It's definitely going to help. It's going to help in an enormous way. So I'm not like a doomer in any way on AI. I just, I hope that we can adapt and that the humans need not apply. Dystopia does not take over.
All right. So before I let you go, first I'll give you an opportunity to plug into your work and where people can follow you or read the book. And then also before I let you go, if there are any critical details you think we messed up or missed out, or anything else that you think is currently going on that you really would like for people to be aware of.
Yeah, thank you. It's at Seamus Bruner on all platforms. I mean, X most especially. I don't really do any Instagramming, but I do have accounts that occasionally get updated there. SeamusBruner.com. So SeamusBruner.com. And you can get the book, Controligarchs, Exposing the Billionaire Class, Their Secret Deals, and the Globalist Plot to Dominate Your Life at Controligarchsbook.com. And that's like the word control mashed together with the word oligarchs, Controligarchsbook.com.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. This was a lot of really fascinating insights on things that have been circling around in my brain that I wanted to delve into. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.